This is the Lee Gimpel Show. You will learn so much from Lee. And if you are putting on virtual or hybrid events or in-person events in general, I really, when Lee says, I really want to help organizations create better meetings, he really means it. At Matrix Group, we say you want to be intentional about the experiences that your attendees have. And what Lee does is he'll help you create really an intentional experience. So he's not going to do the sales pitch for himself. So I'm going to do it because I have been so impressed with what Lee has to say about meetings and how to make them really meaningful. So I think we've already gotten started. So let's go ahead and get started.
I'm Lee, that's Joanna.
Yeah. So let me tell you kind of the genesis for this. So we, I called up Lee and I said, Lee, Terry and Merla say we need to get introduced. Tell me what you do. And he said, well, I help make meetings better. And then we started to have a conversation about what does it mean to make a better meeting? And we've all come out of a year of virtual meetings with, some organizations have been more successful than others. I think some organizations have come to us saying, we really want is it possible to have a virtual meeting that's just as transformative as an in-person event? And we've had other organizations come to us to say, we did a couple of things and some of our attendees said they were really great, but it left them feeling a little bit cold because it was missing some of the elements that they really look forward to. So Lee, you spend a lot of time thinking about this. Like, what do people really want out of their meetings? And you tell them the story about your best friend.
Also named Lee here. So to answer the first question, what do people want out of meetings? I think it's easy to say, well, we go to these meetings so that we can learn stuff, but I'll have you all do this right now. Think about how many conferences you've been to. Do it in your head, right? How many conferences you've been to in a year, and then in how many years you've been doing this, right? 50, 100, right? A lot of them. And then I want you just to do the math of how many sessions were there at each one of those conferences, right? So I do this math and I'm like, I've probably been to 1,000 sessions. I don't know. How many of them do you remember? Very few, right? Very, very few. What'd you say?
But there are things you remember about conferences.
Yeah. And I think that's, we walk away from these conferences, I think, having made connections. I think people learn stuff, but typically it's that people walk away thinking, oh, I met someone and that person, enriched my life somehow. I got a job because of that person. We became partners. We did a research project together. And so, yeah, one of my best friends who's here in town, we met 10 years ago at a conference actually in Chicago, and then we met in New Orleans. And I asked him, I said, what do you remember about those conferences? And he says, I remember that there was natural light, which is a funny thing to remember about a conference. And I remember meeting you. He's like, I don't remember anything else about the conference. And I think sometimes we kind of deceive ourselves in saying, like, we're planning this big conference and there's 100 different workshops and there's keynotes. People may want to hear, Oprah as a keynote, right? But it's really important that they connect with other people. And I think, Joanna, you and I talked about this idea of like meetings are places where people meet and conferences are places where people confer. And they're not just places where people sit in rooms and stare at screens and, watch PowerPoints. So, that is my take on this. If you are looking for someone to advocate for like conferences with lots of PowerPoints, you've come to the wrong webinar.
Yeah, but Lee, what's interesting is I think that I talk to meeting planners and they say, oh God, what I'm accustomed to focusing on is kind of the logistics of the meeting, the hotel, the food, the opening session, but also the education. They're not necessarily focused on creating these intentional experiences for people to actually network and create connections, because that happens organically in person, maybe not, yeah. Right? And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So, but I think what happens is, because we're virtual, you have to design these intentional experiences for these meetings and these confer experiences to happen. So I think we're going to do our first breakout, right?
Yeah, so this is what we promised you. And I've been talking a lot about this. When people ask me to speak, they're like, can you do a presentation? And then I'm like, why don't we do this differently? Because it seems silly for me to stand up and do a PowerPoint on, meeting people and when that's not what's happening. So Joanna and the team were like very gracious and we all jumped into this. So we're going to try and demonstrate this. We're going to put you in some breakout rooms. It's just going to be fun.
And we want you to talk about, what do you want to get out of meetings?
Yeah. Like, what brings you here today? Why are you here? What do you want to get out of this? And I think, Joanna, between the two of us, we know an awful lot of people in the audience, and I know they're all great people. I'm like really excited to see all these people in the same room. So yeah, we're just going to give you 5 minutes. It's never enough, but just a quick say, hello.
What
Who
brings
are
you
you?
here?
Yeah, yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I met Lewis and Julie too.
Oh,
And Lewis, I gather, is a friend of yours, and
yeah.
Julie's with a small association. And so, even in 5 minutes, you get to make a connection and learn a little bit about them because there was only three of us. We got some airtime.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? We're up here talking, but I'm like, oh, I still really enjoy the part where I'm not talking and we're actually getting to meet other people who care about this stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I'm just going to drop something in the chat. I think this was a question that we were going to ask people, but we'll just keep talking. You can sort of answer this as you will. What's your favorite or great meeting you've been to and why? So if you want
Yeah, like what great experience did you have? I guess, or we're talking in person and virtual, right?
yeah, I mean, to me, I think eventually we're just going to call them events and we're not going to say, oh, it was virtual. It was just like, yeah, this thing that we do online. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I'm kind of hoping that in the future that we can really blend, right? So I think we talked about how we don't like hybrid, what are we going to call it? But in the future, I mean, maybe, what the virtual world has taught us is that we can incorporate people who cannot travel for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Won't travel, can't travel, don't have the budget, have all kinds of constraints, et cetera. I mean, I think of my sister who, because of a compromised immune system, really cannot travel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about, I keep coming back to the NFL. I've been thinking about the NFL a lot the last year. And people say, oh, I'm going to go watch football. And we know either like you're at home and you're watching football on TV or you're going to go to the stadium. They've done a really good job with hybrid and they've been
Yeah,
doing it for 30 years.
that's true. You're right. Football has always been hybrid.
Right. And
Okay, so let's see what some of this. So I loved ASA's Great Ideas Conference last year. So tell us specifically what was great about it. Like, were there a couple of experiences that were really great? Somebody says, Lee's Conference Organizer Summit, a lot of learning in a short time. Multiple meetings, not being passive, lots of activity with a purpose. The best meeting is the next one, always improving. ASA Hawaii, great content, connections, and location.
Yeah, I think I mean, this is not what we're here to talk about today, but I think that the location is really an interesting piece of this, that over the last year, I feel like it's really pulled this curtain off of the idea that like we only go to conferences to do learning and important stuff. And it turns out like people really want to go to Hawaii and the learning was like, something else, right?
Yeah. By the way, someone asked a question and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we didn't do a proper introduction. So I introduced Lee, but I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Joanna Pineda. I'm CEO and Chief Troublemaker at a company called Matrix Group. And Bespeak is our virtual meeting platform. And Bespeak comes from the word, it's kind of a play on speaking, which is what we do at conferences, but it's also a play on the word bespoke. Because what we want to do is really help our clients to create really very custom handcrafted events that are unique, but also beautiful and make money. So if someone is looking for a virtual event platform and you're really looking for a partner and a guide, then please be in touch. Because I mean, the reason we're partnering with Lee is we have the capacity to really create something interesting with the program and give your attendees lots of opportunities to really connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? That there's this approach of, do you want it? Yeah, we can do that for you. I mean, I think that seems different than, if you want Zoom to do something it doesn't do, good luck. You're not going to get that.
Yeah, exactly. So Lee, one thing that you and I were talking about how we know of some organizations that are really thinking, we just have to get through this pandemic and then we're going to go back to in-person meetings.
Yeah.
But you feel pretty strongly that in-person meetings aren't as great as we sometimes think in our brain.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like back in the good old days, right? Or like back when America was great. And you're like, well, what's it? I don't know. Yeah, I think it's certainly different. And you can have like a shrimp cocktail made for you at that event that you're probably not going to have in your house. But I think people forget how they would leave those conference centers at the end of the day and just feel drained and tired. And then, the 2 days of, getting there and getting back and then being there. And, we talk about just how tiring it is to be on Zoom or in these virtual meetings, and everyone's like, oh man, I hate being parked in front of a screen all this time. And if you can see behind me, this is what an in-person conference looks like. And people are like, oh, I hate looking at screens. You were looking at a screen most of that conference, right? So.
And you were looking at, if you were sitting in the back, you were looking at a screen where you couldn't read the text.
Right, yeah. So, and then I think, was there networking in person? Yeah, there was, but it wasn't intentional, right? If you were good, like I'm looking out into some of the audience here, and I know that there are some like very gregarious, very socially competent folks out there. And, it may have gone great for you, but for most people, when you say, just go walk into a room where you don't know anyone and just go meet people, it is not easy. And most conferences are not set up to make that happen. So when you're like, the National Association of whatever, there's the Thursday night reception. Oh, Joanna, you and I knew each other, so we just connected, but I didn't network. I just we caught up. That's a different thing. And if I didn't know anyone, I sat in the back and I was like, I gotta reply to this email, right? It's not that I don't have any friends. So, you could eat cheese in person there, but I don't know that you were really connecting with people. That wasn't intentional. It still put a lot of work on your shoulders to do stuff. And it was a lot of hassle to get. I don't know. Conferences are great. I'm looking forward to getting back to conferences in person too, but I don't think they solve a lot of the problems that we're thinking that we associate with online events. Like, oh, the networking wasn't particularly good. It was a lot of just sitting and watching. Like, a lot of similarities between what have been online or what have been in-person conferences and what's going on, virtually here too.
So I think about my clients who, I was thinking about how I think I was in one session where actually one of the speakers said, some meetings are reunions. Yeah. Not literally reunions, although obviously there are reunions where, like, if you go to ASE annual, there's probably a significant number of people who have been coming to annual every year for decades.
Yeah.
So I've been going to ASE annual for a long time. So when I go, there's people I want to see, lots of people I want to connect with, and I'm not going to have a problem. I'm not going to have a free moment, right? I'm going to meet some new folks, and I'm actually pretty socially, I'm pretty comfortable just walking into a group and saying, hi, I'm Joanna,
Yeah.
It still gives me, the butterflies, even though my title says CEO. I still get nervous, but I do it, right? And then in the end, I didn't die, and so that gives me courage to do it again.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't, but I know a lot of people who are going to be at annual. I'll even send out an email to a whole bunch of people. So Lee, but here's the problem, right? If your first time at a conference and you're by yourself, it's actually not a great experience.
Yeah,
because you don't know anyone, you don't even know how to navigate the program, and you're sitting in rooms with screens.
Yeah. Also, I should say, we're not going to talk for the rest of this. I don't know if we told people what our agenda is, but we're going to have people break down an actual conference agenda.
Right, that's right.
So stay tuned for that. It's not just going to be the two of us talking the whole time.
Yeah. So we just kind of want to give you some of our thoughts about this. I thought about this is, if you're looking at the picture that Lee has here, he's saying, look, for the I've been to so many conferences. Like the last ASE conference I attended in person, there was a keynote presentation, lots of people on their phones. They might have been posting on social media, or maybe they were checking their email, right? So how can we improve on that, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I remember I was at one ASE meeting where there was just actually a really amazing keynote by, I think it was the editor of Forbes. It was really great. And I remember thinking, man, that was so awesome. I got to find people who attended that session so I can talk to them about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone in the session, in the quick glance that I looked. And then you're like, how am I going to connect with people who attended the session? And then I go back to the office and I say, I attended this great session, but they didn't attend the session, so they can't talk to me about it either.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the things we got to overcome in person and virtually.
Yeah. To your point of, you know everyone at ASE, and I keep coming back to, Barbara's on this call. Barbara knows everybody, right? You show up and it is a reunion. The challenge, of course, is for people who are there the first year. And I always laugh. Often conferences do nothing for them. They're like, we'll give you a little name tag that says first time attendee. And like, maybe that does work some sort of magic, but it probably doesn't. And then some associations do this thing, or some conferences do this thing where they do like a reception for first time attendees, which is like, it's better than nothing, but it's a little bit like, I mean, no offense to anyone here, but it's a little bit like the loser table at the
Exactly. I totally agree.
You know, here are a bunch of, we're going to put you in a room with a bunch of people who also don't know anything and also aren't connected to anyone else here and also don't have any power in this industry. You get to meet those people. And, you know, I've
So Lee, I have an idea for that. And this is
Yeah.
what I tell my clients in person and virtually. I say, you know, what we do is we take the first time attendees and we slap a ribbon that says first timer, right? It basically says noob right on their forehead. So what I say is pick them out and assign them to some of your leaders and say, call them up and schedule a 15-minute coffee to say, hey, I see you're new to the conference. Let me walk over the agenda with you and tell you kind of what the must attend events are. And then I say, tell them to do 3 things. Tell them to walk over the agenda, attend a social event with them, and introduce them to 3 people.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, but that's intentional, and that's everything that we're talking about here
Exactly.
today, right? It's really different, right? It's different to, as that conference organizer, to give somebody the charge of, you're the senior person in this industry, and I asked nothing of you but to like make a new friend and sort of pull someone around and just, you know, put them under your wing. Very little.
Imagine you're like attending a conference for the first time, you're by yourself, and you meet with somebody who's been a committee member for 5 years, been a member for 6.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't even have to be someone who is from your sector or whatever, or your age group or whatever. But like they just say, hey, you know, let me walk you through the agenda. You do not want to miss the foundation dinner. Oh, and by the way, this, and yeah, let's go to this event together. And when we're there, get them introduced. So what happens is, 1, you feel special. 2, you are brave. And when you're brave, then you stop being so nervous and you start to absorb and kind of enjoy the experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guarantee you, right? If I show, I'm embarrassed to say I've never been to an in-person ASAE meeting, but if I did, I would walk around with Joanna, and it would be an amazing meeting for me because everyone would be coming up and be like, "Oh, Joanna's like, here's Lee," and I'd be like, "I'm the mayor of this town, and I just started." And you know, I think we shouldn't leave that up to people to do themselves. I talk about this, right?
Exactly.
I just did a session the other day on this, and really about like changing the room. It's much easier to change the room, and by the room I mean the conference or the reception itself, than it is to build people into super confident, super gregarious, sparkling fonts of conversation. That's really difficult, right? To usually when you talk about, you know, what's networking advice, it's come up with a really good 30-second pitch, and then confidently walk across the room and be like, "Hello, my name's Lee," right? But if the room is like, it's just Joanna and her friends who are in a little defensive circle, and they are not open to somebody else coming into them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but we can.
So Lee, before we get into the breakout, you know, I think you've got some really specific ideas for adding networking, and so do I. So, and let me just say this. So I just gave you guys a suggestion for what you can do in person, but the truth is you can do this virtually too. And I've told my clients this, and they've done that. Like in our platform, for example, there is a way to message people easily, and there's a way to actually create, like, you know, a meeting, like a video room, and send an invitation and have them accept it. So we had a client do that, and they said, what a great idea. And they got their board to reach out to the first time attendees, and they said, hey, let's schedule, you know, before the general session, a 15-minute meet and greet. And that's going to be so significant to feel like somebody who was, quote, important in the organization just reached out to you and said, hey, and I'm going to do an email introduction to a couple of folks. Super meaningful. I'm going to give you a couple of other ideas, and I know Lee's got some ideas, and then we're going to do the exercise. I think, Lee, you and I rail against the conference that's all pre-recorded content.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think it becomes a series of YouTube videos that then I can do anywhere, or people will say, oh, it's all pre-recorded. I don't have time today, so I'm going to watch it next week. And then they don't. And I can tell you from the analytics that they don't. Even when you say the session is so amazing, it's going to be recorded, and people say it was amazing, I'm so bummed I missed it, I'm going to watch it next week, and they don't. So
it reminds me of conference or of concert videos, right? People are like, my God, Queen, Wembley, 86, it was amazing. Oh, just watch the video. It's like, I don't know. People don't really go back and watch those videos.
So I guess the question is like, how do we create within those sessions the opportunity to really interact? So Lee, what are some ideas? And then we'll have them redo a conference.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, when people, it's different in person, but when we start online, the first question I will generally ask people, once we get past the why are you doing this, but what platform are you on? And if the answer is like, it's a platform where, networking looks like we've given you a chat box, all right, it's better than nothing, but that's hard. We're gonna, our annual conference is gonna be super engaging and there's gonna be a ton of networking. Tell me about your platform. It doesn't allow that. Okay, that puts us behind the 8 ball right away. Zoom, we're using Zoom because it's like the easiest, lowest common denominator here. It can be really powerful. And then also, it gets stitched into a lot of platforms. So I think people recognize it. So what we just did earlier, I think, is a really easy thing to do. It's 5 minutes. We're just going to start off. We're going to recreate this moment where people are walking into a room and they're bumping into each other and they're like getting coffee and they're just, oh, Julie Bishop, what brings you here, right? Those little moments that don't happen if you're all just behind a screen and all you have is a chat box. That doesn't happen. Although I do say like chat's happening here and I'm trying to read as we're going and I'm missing all of it and I feel bad about it. So, I think that's the first thing is just, you have to intentionally put it in. And even if it's just these casual moments, I think that's an easy place to start. The other thing I would say, I talk about this all the time. I keep it right next to me. So usually when we have a speaker, we divide these things into like, there's a learning session and there's a networking session, and there's no reason that you can't do both. So we do lots of versions of the same thing, but usually what we see is, I introduce Joanna as my speaker. I say, Joanna, you have 45 minutes to fill. I hope you're good at PowerPoint because people are just going to be sitting there watching you and you're just going to be talking at this thing. There we go, 45 minutes. And then we have, if there's time, there's 5 minutes of questions at the end, which means 1 or 2 people get to ask a question. And I would say, let's still do an introduction. And then let's say, Joanna, can you fill 10 minutes of like a quick presentation, or could we do
5 tips?
Right, something, right? Or could we do a quick little interview like we're doing here? Easy, you don't have to spend time on the PowerPoint, fine. And then we break people out in these groups and we say, well, we're talking about the future of hybrid events or something like that. Well, why don't you all talk about that together and as a group, come up with the questions that you want to ask Joanna, who's an expert on these things. This is networking right here. We don't raise this big flag and we don't point, arrows at it. We don't say, now you're about to all do networking. Networking is happening now. We're going to do icebreakers, right? But it happens. And I will almost guarantee you that in this string, the part that people walk away with is like, oh my gosh, I met Julie, I met Lewis, I met, and it's great if they get something else from Joanna or they get something from me, but if conferences are meant to connect, this is one of these easy ways we get to do it, while also making it so much easier for our speaker who doesn't have to do a 45-minute presentation.
Absolutely.
Right, answer questions that came out of the small groups. Joanna, can you answer a bunch of questions about association technology? Yes, that's what I know a lot about. Just send those questions to me, right?
Yeah, and I think some of it is, platform specific, right? Like you said. So I think what you want to do is really kind of talk to your vendor and say, hey, what is possible? What are other organizations doing? I'm going to give you 3 ideas. So we've had a bunch of clients start their conferences with what we call morning coffee. And morning coffee in our platform, and we can do it at other times, is where you click morning coffee and you get randomly matched with X number of people. So like you get randomly put into a room with 5 other people. And so you start your day meeting some new folks. And we find that morning coffee, it works better in the morning than in the evening for whatever reason. But people are just kind of open. So that's one thing that we do. The other thing that we've seen clients do is they'll have content presentation followed by a breakout.
Right.
So that then people can kind of deepen the learning. And when we say breakouts, we actually mean small group breakouts, because it's not really a breakout discussion if you've got 75 people in the Zoom room and like 3 people are talking.
Right.
Like it doesn't work. The other thing that we've done recently is we had a client that they were doing a boot camp. And what they did was they actually assigned people to tables. And on each person's schedule, it was content breakout, but you got assigned to the same people all day. And what people said they loved about it was, they could see the slides during the content presentation. And then when they went into the breakout rooms, they were in a room with the same 8 or 10 people all day long, so that by the end of the day, they got a chance to interact with the speaker during the session via chat. but then they got a chance to kind of deepen the learning with a trained facilitator with the same group of people. So at the end of the conference, they felt like I got to know Lee pretty well because all day long he was in my room.
Yeah, for better or for worse, right? What you may decide is like, Lee is just ridiculous and terrible and has nothing good to say, but you don't get that when people just drop into, the chat. Here's my LinkedIn profile, and we all like do this LinkedIn thing.
Right.
I have no idea who these people are, but after a
Right.
day, you either feel like, yeah, I really want to connect with this person, or I don't.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there was a lot of chat about pre-recorded, and somebody said we had pre-recorded with the speakers available in the chat. Certainly, that's great. I'll tell you, the formula that I love is all live. I know that people feel like it's risky. If you want to do something that's a little bit in between, the other formula that we love is pre-recorded with live Q&A with the speakers actually on screen, interacting with the audience, because then people feel like, oh, it's live, my question just got answered. I think there's something about the element of live and people feeling like I'm here, or I should be here at a specific time and place.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're saying, it's a different kind, it's a valid kind of learning, this sort of like self-paced, or you watch something on your own, like there's a lot of value to that. But if you're saying there's this thing that exists that's an event, it's a place where people come together who all care about the same thing to interact. If we remove that interaction piece and all that's happening is I'm watching a pre-recorded video, I mean, we're all supposed to be talking about networking, but I think, connection is really the heart of it. And if I'm, it's a breakout and we're connecting about the speaker that we just heard in this session, that's really different than me sitting at home in my pajamas and watching a 45-minute, it's the thing you were saying at the beginning, oh my gosh, this thing's so interesting and you have no one to talk to. And then that moment just disappears, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to do now is give people an opportunity to take a standard conference agenda and in a small group setting, make it better. So Lee, do you want to share the document?
Yeah. So
Lee's going to share a Google Doc in the chat, and then Brian is going to put us into breakouts. So Lee, why don't you walk us through this before we do the breakouts?
Yeah, so I'm going to share this link in a sec.
Brian just shared it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so do you see my screen share? Just quick thumbs up from that. Okay, cool. I just want, if you've done anything with me before, you've seen this format. I'm just going to have you look at this for about a minute or two, maybe make some notes on your own. The question is pretty simple. Like, this is a mock-up conference that we've created here. What would you change? What's missing? Maybe what do you like? But I think it's easier to look at, what's wrong with it.
And Lee and I have seen many versions of this. Yeah. So we're not saying that this is a bad program, but what we're saying, how can you make it better?
Yeah. So, we're going to turn this over to you, and then we'll put you in small groups. And here's the secret. You're going to be networking in those small groups. That's what this is all about. But yeah, I mean, Joanna and I only have so much to say up here. We could talk about this for probably 2 days, but you came here probably to connect with other people who care about the stuff that you care about. And maybe meet someone else who can help you doing this. I mean, like, I'm looking out and someone's going to be in a group with Bruce Rosenthal, and he's going to know an awful lot about something, right?
Absolutely.
And so yeah, take a minute or two just to look through that on your own. Either pull it up in your own browser, or you can see the screen share here. Let me move my screen so the whole thing shows. And then we'll put you on breakout rooms in just about a minute or so, and Brian will do that. So 1 or 2 minutes of thought time here, writing. The agenda here.
My group did.
Oh, well, you guys are better than us. But right, we got some things. But I mean, that's the beauty of this is we're still connecting about this stuff that we care about. We're still talking about conferences. We're still talking about associations. And that doesn't happen if you just sit in the audience and you watch, Lee and Joanna as like some dreadful panel, right? Just talk. So I don't know. I love this piece. What'd you talk about, Joanna? Or do we want to hear from people? What do we want to do?
We did. We actually talked a lot about it. So we said, I was with Meg and Hillary, and we liked the idea of morning coffee. And, I think it was Meg or Hillary who said that what they do is they give people a $5 Starbucks gift card. And we like the idea of saying, hey, grab a cup of coffee and start talking. We said there's no dedicated time for the exhibit hall. it's kind of like the exhibit hall opens, but there's so many other things going on that there's no way people are going to visit that exhibit hall. We said too many pre-recorded sessions. We need to give people a reason to be there live. For the end of the day networking, there was, I think, you know, the individual room where there's 75 people, way too, you know, way too many people. There's probably going to be a few people sharing, but, you know, the rest of the people are just going to be watching. Let's see. We said, how can we add interactive elements, polls, breakouts, trivia, etc. And then we thought that the board update at the end of the day could be a little boring, so maybe move that to early in the day and add wow to the end of the day, so that people feel like there's a reason for them to stick around all day.
Yeah, that's a good one. I just dropped it in the chat. If anyone wants to, I guess just drop ideas in that you have to
Or
fix.
if somebody wants to unmute and tell us what your group talked about, who wants to report?
You didn't know you were going to be part of this presentation today. Here's someone.
Well, it's interactive.
Yeah.
Come on, people.
All right, Cheryl.
Awesome.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
All right. Well, some of the things that we talked about was that given the fact that it was across the United States, we would start later and break it up into a couple of days because that's a very long day. So that was one of the things. We would also have we also wanted to break the awards up separately from the board. We didn't think that those two would be conducive. And again, break it up within the 3 days that we're doing things. Also talked about doing like a morning coffee or starting out with trivia. Also to have more breakout rooms throughout the day. And again, we also felt that there were too many pre-recorded sessions, so that at a minimum to be able to have the speakers live. And let's see. I think we also talked about the exhibits, also having just specific times each day for the exhibit, and possibly letting the sponsors maybe introduce some of the speakers or have an opportunity to be giving them a few minutes of time to talk, and also maybe doing some kind of a contest so that people are encouraged to go to the exhibits, you know, like find specific things, you know, within each exhibit booth or something.
Fabulous. Wow. Anybody else want to report?
So one of the things that a lot has already been said, but one of the things that we were saying is that, you know, there's an opportunity to use pre-records well. For example, the board president, whenever in the day that you choose that to be, the board president giving a 20-minute presentation could be pre-recorded, and you could use the pre-records well to, instead of have them sit in front of a computer, do more like a TED Talk style kind of presentation, so that it's not a PowerPoint and it's not another PowerPoint, so it can be more dynamic and more engaging and stuff like that. So there is use for for pre-records, and because that wasn't going to be interactive anyway, this actually allows the board president then to be available in the chat to have that engagement while the pre-record is playing back. So that yes, there's a lot of pre-records here, etc., but there is a way to use them well sometimes.
Love it. Anybody else want to share? And then I'll ask Lee a couple closing questions, because I can't believe that we're almost at the top of the hour.
There's
a lot of great chatter going on in the chat here.
And Leah, we're going to share the transcript with everyone, right?
We absolutely will.
I was in a room with Daida and Serena, and they had a lot of good ideas in the sense of flipping the script in terms of opening up with some type of networking tied into morning coffee, some type of games. The exhibit hall needs to be revised. Nobody would ever go when the sessions are at the same time. It's too long to cover the full agenda in a day online. People will tune out. A lot of other ideas in terms of engaging folks. And the more that the attendees are engaged, the easier it is to tie back into the sponsors and to make it more engaging for everyone. So thanks, Daida and Sarita. Good ideas.
Hey, so Lee, I think there's kind of conventional wisdom that we all want to get back in person, and that virtual is kind of the country cousin to in person. But
Yeah.
you think that there's some really great elements from virtual that should make their way back to in person.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is in person really feels like a privilege, that if we're going to bring people back in person, let's really make it worthwhile to be there in person. If it's just going to be watching, PowerPoints, I don't know that we need to be in a convention center in Vegas to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that we've taken from, I hope that we've taken from from virtual, is this keep it simple, stupid kind of thing of, people come, they're like, we were going to have 42 different rooms and 20 different concurrent things and a poster, and it's like, wow, it's a lot to manage. Do we really need all these different things happening? And maybe not, like, could we do a couple big sessions, or could we do some, just some smaller breakout stuff? So I think that the simplicity, maybe that brings it back. I think it's shined a weird light on places where we bribe people. Poster sessions is one that comes to mind, and people are like, well, we can't figure out how to do poster sessions because the only reason people went to poster sessions is open bar. So like, if people are only going to your poster session because of open bar, maybe we need to rethink that poster session. So I think it shined a light there. And then I would also say, one of the things that's nice for me and I really like about, when I run sessions on Zoom is I can, as Brian and Leo were doing today, thank you guys, press a button and people just are magically in these groups with people they don't know. I just met Nancy, right? I probably wouldn't have met Nancy at an actual physical event because, like, was she in my circle already? No. And I think, this idea of, sort of playing God, and I'm just going to put you in these groups and you're going to like it. It's going to be good. And just trust us on that. We weren't really doing that in person. And I'd like to see that come from online to the in-person events. That's 3. I feel like I could keep going, but
Yeah, for me, I think that the intention that we have brought to virtual to really create these, opportunities for people to really meet new people and confer with each other. I think we want to bring that back to in person. Don't make it an accident that Joanna meets a bunch of new people. Make it intentional so that every attendee has access to good education, and really good networking and opportunities to really connect. So I know we've only got a couple minutes. So we are going to drop contact information for myself and Lee. So I'm going to say this again. I think what you're seeing here is like, Lee is really an expert at helping to design a better meeting. And if you're looking for a meeting platform that really can help you create a kind of a bespoke event with lots of opportunities to interact, we hope you'll check out Bespeak. And Lee, you're doing something on the 13th, and I'll talk to them about something I'm doing tomorrow. So tell us about this event that you're doing on the 13th.
Yeah, I think it actually ties in quite nicely if I think I know what you're talking about. So I'll put it in the chat here. I did one of those the other day. It sort of sold out, so we're doing a second one. We all kind of know what Zoom looks like, or these, we sit in boxes or we watch webinars. And there's a whole genre of these new avatar-based or spatial sound or video proximity systems that are coming out. Wonder is one of them. We're going to be doing a demo on that. Really just to reimagine how we work through space together. Actually, a couple of you were at that the other day, which is fun. So yeah, sign up at I just put it in the chat. And Joanna, I think you guys are adding functionality like that to.
Yeah, so we actually have, we've just unveiled a new networking lounge in Bespeak. So we've got lots of different ways that you can use video rooms. We have the morning coffee, the dynamic rooms, we've got the breakouts, we've got presentation rooms, but we have added a new networking lounge where you literally, when you click, you'll see a lounge and you can pop in and out of video rooms. And some of the rooms can be branded and some of the rooms can have topics and some of them can be completely open. We've got mood music in the lounge, so we are unveiling that. So if you're interested, I think Brian and Leah will pop something in the chat. That's happening tomorrow at 4. We are intentionally doing it at the end of the day so that you can have a cocktail and pop in and out of the lounge and meet some new folks. I'll close with this one thing. I was working with a client and she said, Joanna, I am an introvert, by nature, and she said networking events terrify me. because the idea that I'm going to put myself out there and kind of, walk into a group of people who are already having a conversation just terrifies her. But she said virtually she's been able to come out of her shell, because when she pops into a video room, people all look at her and say, hey, welcome. And she says, I don't always get that in person because they're in the middle of a conversation and they're not always welcoming. So she said it's been a really different experience for her. Hey, Lee, I can't believe we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you for a fun, and look, in an hour, we got to have a conversation and 2 breakouts, and I got to meet some folks. So thank you so much. I hope that for you all, you came away from the session with some really, really good ideas. We will be sharing, Leah, the recording, the slot, we didn't have any slides, so the recording as well as the chat with you all in the next couple days. And we always love your feedback, so let us know how we did, let us know and how we can be of help to you, and we hope you have a great day. Lee, anything to close with?
No, thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone for attending and being active and part of this. Thanks.